Hey everyone, welcome to our channel. In this video we will be covering possibly one of the coldest cases in the state of Missouri. This is the story of Bonnie Huffman. Bonnie Loretta Huffman was born in Whitewater, Missouri on November 19, 1933 to Otto and Lily Huffman. Standing at 5'10", she was described as a beautiful brown-eyed brunette who was full of life, ambitious of her future, and loved by many. Graduating as class valedictorian from Delta High School in 1950, she enrolled at Missouri State Teachers College with her basketball scholarship and income she made from working at Woolworth's department store. After her freshman year of college, Bonnie became a teacher in a one-room schoolhouse at Buckeye School in Old Appleton, Missouri. There, she taught kindergarten through 8th grade. While working, Bonnie put electricity in her family's 3-bedroom farmhouse near Allenville. She also helped support the family when farming wasn't paying out as much. In the summer of 1954, after 3 years of teaching, Bonnie accepted a higher-paying job offer at the Missouri Utilities Company and was going to start her new position after the 4th of July weekend. Just days before Independence Day, Bonnie's longtime boyfriend Doug had finally returned home from a deployment in Korea. While Doug was deployed, Bonnie wrote him letters every day and couldn't wait for him to come home so the two of them could marry and start a family. On July 2nd, Bonnie and Doug had plans for the evening, but hours before, Doug abruptly ended their relationship, saying he wasn't ready for marriage. Heartbroken and hurt, Bonnie called her closest friend Mary Lou Bess, and the girls made plans for that evening with Mary's husband and brother-in-law. According to some news articles, the Besses met up with Bonnie in Cape Girardeau to go see a movie at the Broadway Theater. After the movie, they went to Wimpy's Drive-In for dinner, and then to the Cape Rock Park to watch the barges float by on the Mississippi River. Still shaken from the breakup, Bonnie asked to go to a nearby tavern to look for Doug in his car. Mary's husband Kramer stated he didn't feel comfortable with the girls going into the tavern because it was kind of a rough joint. Bonnie also had plans to stay with her cousins in Cape, but sadly they were not home. The Besses dropped Bonnie off at her car shortly before midnight, and she ventured back home to Allenville. Around midnight, a few witnesses, including a former classmate and a couple who lived in Delta, spotted Bonnie's gray 1938 Ford sluggardly heading west on Highway 74. They'd also seen a man in a 1947 green Chevrolet following behind her. Bonnie's car couldn't go above 30 miles an hour, so all the witnesses had to pass Bonnie. Around 12:30 a.m., the couple noticed Bonnie's car drive past their home on Route N, and moments later, they witnessed the 1947 green Chevy pass by as well with the horn blaring. At the time, they thought it was someone who knew Bonnie and was trying to flag her down. 20 minutes later, the 47 green Chevy erratically passed their house in the opposite direction, heading south. It's here that Bonnie's cold case begins.
The next morning, while driving down Route N from Allenville towards Delta, Bonnie's younger brother Bobby and his friend had spotted Bonnie's car on the wrong side of the road about 3.5 miles from Delta. Bobby figured the car had clunked out on her again, so he got out to move it. When approaching the car, he noticed one of Bonnie's earrings on the running board and the other on the ground. He also noticed her seat cushion she used in a ditch nearby and a Gene Autry toy cap gun laying next to the car on the gravel. The keys were in the ignition, and the parking lights were still on. Bobby truly began to worry once her car started up with no issues. Bobby and his friend then sped to Doug's house to see if he knew where she was. Doug stated that they had broken up the day before and he had canceled their evening plans. Doug then called the Missouri Highway Patrol to report Bonnie missing. Bobby met up with Sergeant Little at Bonnie's abandoned car on Route N. Sergeant Little took notes about her disappearance, including tire impression marks next to where Bonnie's car was originally parked before Bobby had moved it. He stated another car had to have pulled out at a high rate of speed next to hers. Sergeant Little explained to Bobby that she was probably a runaway and that she would return home soon. Bobby went back home and told the family everything. Lily, Bonnie's mother, panicked and prompted the police to conduct a search team for Bonnie. The police department set up a command post near Delta High School, and dozens of people from the community searched the fields and woods relentlessly, trying to find Bonnie or any clues as to where she could be. On the evening of the 5th, Earl Eakins and his wife were driving from Allenville back to Delta on the search effort on Route N. About 3.5 miles from where Bonnie's car was found, Earl told his wife he smelled something very putrid. She thought it was coming from the hog pens nearby. However, the closer to town they drove, the more overwhelming the smell. Earl decided to pull off on the side of the road and figure out where it was coming from. Yards from the road, he pointed his flashlight in a heavily weeded ditch. There lay the badly decomposed body of Bonnie Huffman. Near her body was an American Legion magazine. Autopsy reports stated Bonnie had a dislocated jaw, abrasions on her knees, and she had died from a broken neck. Bonnie's red blouse and hem were torn. She was wearing her 1950s class ring with the initials BLH. Her purse, glasses, necklace, underwear, and watch were all missing. Police believe Bonnie was the victim of a sex killer, but due to the level of decomposition, they couldn't do a rape kit. Police had many theories about what could have happened to Bonnie. Their main theory was someone had forced her to stop her car with their car, and then forced her out of her car and into theirs by brandishing the toy cap gun. Once inside the suspect's car while they were driving towards Delta, one of the men was attempting to rape Bonnie, and a physical altercation ensued, which resulted in her jaw being broken. In fear of her going to the police, they took all of her belongings, broke her neck, and discarded her in the ditch. Police received a lot of tips and looked into some suspects and conducted nearly 100 polygraph tests. Doug, Bonnie's ex, had an airtight alibi on the night of the murder, so he was the first to be ruled out. They also questioned Earl Eakins, the farmer that discovered Bonnie. He completed a lie detector test and was let go. However, in an article from 2004, Earl stated, "They told me I was the only one who failed it. They know who did it. They just don't want it solved." When looking into the American Legion magazine, police figured out the magazine had been published 6 days before the murder and was mailed to a man residing in St. Louis. During the 4th of July weekend, the owner of the magazine and his nephew were in Bollinger County, which is about 15 to 20 miles from where Bonnie was discovered. The magazine owner stated he never went down Route N on the night of the 2nd or the early morning hours of the 3rd. He was given a lie detector test and passed. It is unclear if the nephew ever took one. Both men denied the murder and they were ruled out. Interestingly, it was discovered that the nephew was convicted of rape in Bollinger County.
1 year after the murder, a 35-year-old farmer from Delta named Roy Estes was being questioned by the police and made a partial confession to killing Bonnie. He went to the police station the next day and signed an official statement. Roy was never taken into custody because law enforcement trusted him and knew he would show up for court when his trial started. A grand jury was impaneled. However, during the trial, with lack of probable cause, Roy Estes was considered not guilty and he was let go. According to the detective in charge of originally questioning Mr. Estes, he didn't feel he was being truthful. Some of the information Mr. Estes was giving them did not match up to the evidence they knew or had. He stated Mr. Estes seemed to be a person who could easily be persuaded into giving a false confession. In 1962, the Southeast Missourian newspaper received a note asking for someone to contact them about Bonnie's murder. The writer was a woman who was suspicious of her daughter's ex-boyfriend and his two relatives. Before the discovery of Bonnie, a local radio station broadcasted about Bonnie missing, and the then-boyfriend stated Bonnie was a tramp and she would never be found alive. He also painted his car a different color when he learned the police were looking for a 1947 green Chevrolet. His young nephew told the anonymous writer that the police had his toy gun and he would never get it back. Lie detector tests were conducted shortly after and all suspects had passed. Another suspect was a local mechanic who had previously worked on Bonnie's car. Witnesses claimed he was wearing a watch that possibly matched Bonnie's after the murder. A friend of the mechanic talked about the murder years later, stating Bonnie was given a ride by them, and she accidentally fell out of the car due to her rejecting the mechanic's sexual advances. In 2004, the Cape Girardeau Police Station received a letter from an anonymous writer from Florida with no return address. In the letter, the writer stated he was driving home from a dance hall that night and noticed a car stopped in the middle of the road on Route N. He thought the car's owner needed help, so he stopped to assist them. He noticed no one was in the car, and within seconds he heard a woman screaming, "Help me." He then saw two men, one tall and the other short and stocky, throwing a woman into a ditch. The men noticed the writer and chased after him. The writer was able to get away, but never came forward at the time due to Delta being a small town and fear of retaliation. Police have not had any more letters from this writer since. In March of 1975, law enforcement destroyed most of the physical evidence, only keeping documentation and a single fingerprint that was taken from the rearview mirror of Bonnie's car. Many witnesses and potential suspects have since passed away. For the last 6 decades, Bonnie's family has never given up hope in finding justice for Bonnie. We wanted to share this cold case with you in hopes someone with any information can finally come forward. Sadly, July 3rd, 2019 will mark 65 years since Bonnie was unexpectedly taken from this earth. If you have any information on Bonnie's case, please call 573 339 6312.